So let me see. So there's a question here from Andre as well, another Andre, and that's on Galera cluster. So Galera cluster is InnoDB only. If it is it recommended not to use MyISAM? I don't know if that's a question for Art or for Andre.
I think for Andre, for Art, yeah.
Yes. In principle, you can use MyISAM theoretically as long as you put everything into a transaction. But it's not guaranteed. It's not entirely 100% safe. So we actually have one of those advisors that will give you the advice to please change your schema to InnoDB if you're running a Galera cluster. So we run that in the background, and we advise people to use InnoDB only.
Great, great. Thank you, Art. And there's a question here from Zoltan, and the question is whether, in your experience, or in your experience, how does EC2 perform with a MariaDB-based cluster? That might be for you, Andre, maybe.
Yes. Well, basically, as we mentioned, we tried running MariaDB clusters on Microsoft Azure and AWS. And for us, the main problem was the IOPS problem. So when we first tried to run the cluster on Azure, it went down immediately. And we tried to resize the VMs, really big ones and really expensive ones, and it wasn't really helping. And then we found that the number of IOPS offered by cloud infrastructures like Amazon and Microsoft Azure, they actually have a few how-to guides on how to set up a RAID on their virtual machines. Actually, I think EC2 performs slightly better. I don't really want to blame anyone, so you may need to check it for your app. For us, we had to choose the local SSD storage just because the number of IOPS we were not getting. Although I can say that at Amazon there are some SSD optimized instances which actually showed around 90,000 IOPS in benchmark. So, but they of course cost quite a lot. So it will depend on you. I've given you the tests that you can run, the commands that you can run to test your disk and see how many IOPS you are getting. So I would say yes, Amazon slightly performs better, but you have to launch the optimized instances, not the basic ones.
Great, great. Thanks, Andre. And there's a question here, probably for you, Art, on ClusterControl, and that's on how does ClusterControl make backups, and how fast or often can they be done? For example, for a 400 GB database, and especially if
that's a good question. I kind of skipped over that we actually support two types of backup. So we can either use MySQL dump, which is like the standards for many years, and basically we configure it in such a way that it starts a transaction, so you can still keep writing to your database, and because we start a transaction and dump all the data, it's basically a safe dump, but it's still obviously quite intrusive compared to what the Percona extra backup offers, and that's the second type we support. Which is basically making a copy of all your InnoDB files, putting a similar copy of MyISAM tables as well as the MySQL dump. So those are the two we offer. For 400 gigabyte dump, it really depends on your infrastructure. So if you have, for instance, SSDs running and you're making a backup of that, it will not be that intrusive. Especially SSDs are really good at also read performance, and also where you make the backup to. So how long is it taking to make the backup? If you make a backup over the network, it could take like half a day, maybe a day to make a 400 gigabyte backup. if you're doing it locally on the same machine, that should be done in like probably half an hour.
Thanks, Art.
And are they consistent? Yes, they are.
Okay. Thanks. Great, thanks for that. Let me see, there's a good few more. Okay, there's a question here on someone using MaxScale with Galera. And the question is whether someone can scale writes involving just Galera. And it's a question by me student, which you can see in the question section. I don't know if that's something that maybe you can answer out.
Yeah. So what I understand is that this user is using the read-write splitter, and on very intensive operations, it drops the connections involving reading and then writing of rows. But it works fine with the readcon router. So basically what MaxScale is able to do, and what is the difference, is that if you start a read session on the read-write splitter, it will first go to a read connection. So it will just assume it's going to one of the Galera hosts that is used for reading. It will always forward the writes to one single host in the cluster. So once you start writing, it will change the connection to the server that is actually used for writing. And this speeds up the writing a bit more, because you're basically writing locally to one server where the number of updates on different servers is going to be lower. So you're basically scaling a bit, in that sense, your writes. Another way it's scaling within Galera is that you actually can write all those transactions in parallel of each other to the other servers. So you define the number of threads within Galera to write, for instance 16, and it's a bit similar to the MySQL parallel replication that it has been now available in 5.6 and 5.7 and MariaDB 10 and 10.1. Where you can write replicated writes in parallel, but in the case of Galera, it's not that limited. You can just write to the same schema, for instance. So therefore it scales a bit the writes on your cluster. Now, does that answer the question a bit?
I'd say it does, and if there's feedback on that, Art, maybe check just the question section. If the member of the audience here has more questions on that.
Oh, we receive a yes.
Yeah.
So
and we've
been answered.
Okay. Okay. Great. Thanks, Mithun. With a few more, so we're just going to continue for a few minutes answering questions, if that's okay. So there's one here for Andre, and Josh is asking this question, and this is whether CloudStats also supports database backups on the end user level.
Yeah. I already sent a reply, but generally, no, we're not doing the database backups, because right now we believe there are other better tools available, like extra backup and ClusterControl. We're not going into that field of managing databases. Where we are going to is into the field of managing servers. And soon from CloudStats panel, you will be able to manage your server, run commands in a secure way, and you can back up files from CloudStats to Amazon AWS S3, or you can back up to a blob storage by Microsoft. You can back up locally, but it concerns the files and it concerns the server management instead of the database management. So for the files and for the servers, management go to CloudStats, and then for the backups of database management, it's best to go to ClusterControl.
Great, thank you. And of course, you can see on your screen here, how to contact either Server 9s or WHO servers if you have questions on the database management side of things or on the server side of things. You can contact either of our teams, and we'll be able to help you. Maybe we can do 2 more questions, maybe also, but there's some nice questions still. There's one here from Nikolai, and I don't know maybe if that's for you, Art. It's the question is whether MySQL Cluster NDB is much faster than a Galera cluster, but I assume that depends on the use case maybe, or on the application.
Yes, I would say that really depends. Even though both of them contain the word cluster, they're not doing the same. Even though both are MySQL based, they're not doing the same. MySQL NDB cluster is basically a MySQL front end in front of a auto-sharding solution. So MySQL Cluster is a sharded environment where you can write to 2 MySQL nodes, and they will just pass the data back to a backend. You could almost compare it to other sharded environments like MongoDB or maybe even Hadoop. So everything is done in the background. The front end is MySQL based. So yes, you can write a lot of data to NDB cluster, and it's a lot faster. But it's a lot more difficult to maintain and to control. Galera cluster is basically setting up 3 or 5 or 7 MySQL masters that are writing data to all the nodes at the same time. So NDB cluster is only writing it to 2 nodes at max, for instance, if you configure it to that, while Galera is always writing to all the nodes in the cluster. So also one of the questions I answered earlier on by screen is that in Galera, the slowest node in your cluster will always be the limiting factor. Well, within NDB cluster, it doesn't really matter that much as long as those MySQL front ends are fast enough.
Great, great. Thanks, Amir and Art. And there's an interesting question here from Andre, but I think that it might take too long to answer it. And we are actually working on a blog post and some content we're going to publish soon on this. So maybe it's best to look out for that. But the question is on MySQL proxy and use cases with that tool. So of course, this is interesting, in comparison with MaxScale and with HAProxy. But I think, so Andre, I think it might take a little bit too long to answer that question just now, but do look out for a blog post, and we're also working, I think, on a white paper on this, on load balancing in general. So look out for that. We'll be publishing that content pretty soon. And in any case, we'll contact you directly after the webinar. So for those questions we can't answer just right now because we're a bit over the hour. We'll answer those questions directly via email, and we'll get back to you. There's a question here also, a last one on ClusterControl, and whether it's possible to restore the structure and the whole setup of a previous ClusterControl infrastructure from the backups. Is that something that's quickly answerable, Art, or is it better to answer afterwards as well?
I think that would be better to answer afterwards because that's a lengthy answer.
Okay.
Yes, it would be possible.
Okay. No, that's fine. I mean, thank you very much for all these questions. This was a really nice interactive session. And so there's a few questions that we weren't able to answer just now because they would take longer to answer, but we will answer you directly after the webinar via email. Also, feel free to contact us, of course, afterwards on either of those contact details that you see on your screen. So you can go to server9s.com or to boostservers.com and contact us that way. But thank you for this great session today. Thank you, Andre, for the presentation and for joining us for today. That was really good to see, the information on CloudStats and how Woo servers were able to help.
Thank you.
And thanks, Art, for the demo of ClusterControl. Thank you, everyone, for your participation. Like I said at the beginning, we're making this is recorded, so we will make the recording available to you in the next 2 days, and you will also have access to the slides that we used for today's session. So thank you very much for now. Have a good rest of the day and a good week, and we'll see you again for sure at one of our next webinars. Or we'll talk to you before that as well. Thanks, and have a good rest of the day. Bye-bye.